Hi, Jim here, just dropping in before this week's episode to tell you about my latest movie, The Apocalypse Box. It's a horror film and I'd love for you to check it out. If you go to apocalypsebox.co.uk, you can find all the links on where you can watch the movie. Right, let's get on with this week's episode. Hi, Jim here, and you're listening to the Honest Filmmaker podcast, career advice from people in the business. This week, I'm speaking to director Tiffany Kim Stevens. After making a bunch of short films that had successful festival runs, Tiff decided she wanted to work on her debut feature, Trigger Happy. The film's due to be released in January 2025, and I chatted to Tiff about how she got the film financed. We talked about working with actors. We also talked about some of the challenges she's faced as a female director, and we spoke about how she's marketing the film and how difficult that process can be. Enjoy. Talk to me a little bit about how you got into filmmaking.
That's a weird one because I usually tell people that it almost feels like I made a soul contract before entering this reality that I was going to be a film director, and if I wasn't pursuing my passion, it would be physically debilitating. So that's really my answer. It's one of those things that I've always known and I've always gravitated towards.
Right. Okay. And when having that, I know what you mean, by the way. I know what you mean. I know it'd be hard not to do that thing. Where did that lead you? Did you go to university to study it? How did you kind of get into it in the first place?
Yeah, well, we're going to go all the way back. As a kid, I grew up in Hong Kong I went to a British school in Hong Kong, and I did GCSE media studies. And then I went on to do IB, higher level film, and then I went to university to go to film school, and it just continued ever since then.
And you've left film school, and I noticed you've got some short films on your resume. I'm assuming that's the first thing you did was create some short films?
I did. It was definitely a great playground and sandbox to be able to explore my style and be able to practice directing. So I've done a lot of fucking short films, man, and they all served me incredibly in so many different ways. And finally being able to make a feature film and get to this place now, I wouldn't have been able to get to where I am now without all the short films that I had done prior.
And those short films you've made, because I noticed you've done quite well festival-wise with all of them. First question about them is, were they self-financed, or were you able to raise money to get them made?
The first ever short film I did was in film school. So I guess tuition money went towards that. But it was really cool to be able to use the resources from film school, like camera equipment, lighting equipment, art department stuff, to be able to make it. And then the first short film that I did outside of school was crowdfunded.
Oh, okay. Crowdfunded.
Yeah.
And how'd you find crowdfunding? What's your experience of that?
It was very difficult. It was very grassroots. It was like running a political campaign because no one knows who you are. Everyone's like, what is the return on this? Okay, you get to just make a fun little movie. Great, good for you. And it was really difficult to try and convince people like, hey, I could be the voice of the next generation, yo. So that was hard, and it's never easy asking people for money, especially with a short film where there really is no return on that investment. It's not a commercially viable avenue. So it was a lot of friends and family and using Star Appeal, the only Star Appeal that we could get at the time. And that really did kickstart us and help us in so many ways. But it was hard, not gonna lie. It was like, you got $1, bro? Hey, put it towards the arts. Become a patron of the arts. So it was one of the hardest things.
Yeah, that sounds tough. I've not done crowdfunding myself, but it always feels like it would be an intense amount of pressure, and it would be a constant need to continually promote and push, and it would be a hard one psychologically. I suppose you probably have to get over a hurdle, an asking for money hurdle in your brain to go, okay, I'm going to be asking for money, big deal, and just ask everybody.
Yeah, it was one of those things.
So you're now on your feature film called Trigger Happy. So tell me the plot for the film.
It is set in a 50s-inspired satirical madcap world where gender roles are reversed, and it is about a repressed husband who attempts to murder his breadwinning wife for life insurance.
Nice. And I will talk more about in the film in a moment, but that brings me on to one of my other questions was, female director, you've been doing it for a while. Have you had any resistance to that? I mean, is there a lot of bias, do you think, for a female director?
Of course. I really try not to play victim because I do believe in a meritocracy, even though that meritocracy goes against me personally because of the way I look and what my gender is. And yeah, you definitely do face a lot of bias, especially when you're in pitch rooms. You know, I would be pitching and they'd be looking at my male counterpart. Or I'd enter different circles in investor events and they think that I'm the assistant of the person, which, you know, you sort of get used to. But then you find different little ways and avenues to be able to navigate these spaces by focusing on the other women in the room, for example, going for the partners and the wives, because there's nothing more important. Like, I feel like a lot of my strategy, especially for fundraising for this, was going through the wives, because there's no better referral than someone's wife. And to answer your question, yeah, I faced a good amount of bias. So there are way more hurdles that I have to jump over than my male counterparts, unfortunately. And I think it's also a double whammy because women and women of color. But hey, we prevail nonetheless. Again, it's bleeding passion, you know, and we're here. So yeah.
The what you said about going through the wife is a really good tip, actually, because we've found, so my wife's my producer, whenever we've been specifically at a party or in Cannes, you can instantly see someone's partner because they're kind of like not as engaged in the party as the partner, and they're kind of looking a little bit left out. And if you chat to them, boom, you're in with the husband, because you're not talking, you're not sort of like my film. You're just chatting, having a nice chat with somebody, and then their partner turns out, oh, your husband is the head of Warner Brothers. That's a funny coincidence, but it works like that. It's a good tip. So Trigger Happy, you were just talking about getting it financed. So where did you get the money from?
We got it from private equity tech investors. So I flew my little butt to San Francisco, snuck into a bunch of parties, and pitched a movie, and everyone was like, oh, it's not an app? For sure, you're not competition. Okay, great.
That's an interesting one. I've not heard of somebody going for that type of money before. And was that a tough sell, or was it right place, right time, just getting to the right person, and it was an easy yes?
It was a tough sell. It's always a tough sell, because at the end of the day, you still need an ironclad business proposal. You still need a waterfall structure. You still need to figure out how you're going to get the money back to these people. And even though they do it for fun because they just make so much money out of tech, just being a tech person working for Google or whatnot, Oracle, it is pocket change to them. But I still want to build that relationship, and I still want to make sure that this is an investment for them. It's not, oh yeah, just a little sponsorship here and there. So being able to understand tax rebates, tax write-offs, shooting in California, which was, the 75% tax rebate. And yeah, essentially what I said, having an ironclad business proposal was really, really key to convincing a lot of these folks to care about putting their money towards a film versus another yacht.
Yeah. And you're a director. How much are you involved in the numbers side of it? Or have you got somebody you go, oh, you're my numbers person. You can, because I mean, my wife's my producer, but I wouldn't be comfortable talking numbers, spreadsheets, all that kind of stuff. Have you got someone else who deals with that, or do you do that yourself?
I have a very good macro overview of everything that goes on because it's the first movie and we're so indie and we're so grassroots. But I do have an incredible producer, Kyle Herman, who worked on Trigger Happy, who was able to really crunch the numbers and, put pen to paper on the Excel spreadsheets and be the great line producer that he is. But at the end of the day, how we really ran it was I was in the room pitching, because ultimately it was, I was going to be the captain of the ship and it was going to be their ship. And then the producer then came in to do all the nitty gritty micro stuff after that.
Yeah. And so on IMDb, it says on there, you've got quadruple citizenship. So is that correct?
Yes, that is not a lie. That is actually true.
So what countries are we, what are the countries we're talking about there?
We got the US, France, Vietnam, and Hong Kong.
Right. Okay. So, wowzers. Okay. So, what does that mix? How does that perspective show in your work, do you think?
I really like to take a very global overview of the stories that I like to tell. I like to create characters that all are somewhat. I love characters that start at rock bottom, and whatever rock bottom looks like for that character, I'm either gonna see them scrounge their way out of the trenches or have the trenches pulled from under them. There isn't necessarily a specific. I don't go for very, very specific things like I have to tell a story that is about my French, American, Asian identity. Like that, there's so many other filmmakers who can come to terms with those things and be vulnerable and put those stories on the screen. I tend to love taking a very macro approach in the sense that I like to, this is so cheesy, Jim, but I like to take people places they've never been before. I want to take people to different parts of realities and universes that they'll never have access to because we're never going to be able to leave planet Earth. So the best thing we can do is help them travel through movies. And having that sort of global appeal really does lean more towards blockbuster over the esoteric art house A24 movie. And that is really where I think I lean towards in terms of my perspective in congruence with the stories that I tell.
And I've seen the trailer. I'm looking forward to watching the film, and it does look like it's got a sort of style of its own. It doesn't look like your average comedy, but it's got a comedy thriller. So when you and I've done a chat recently on the podcast with somebody who melded genres and actually found it quite difficult to sell as a result, or at least to find their audience. Are there any challenges of blending genres that you've run into?
Yes. Biggest one is that we went for satire, which is such a sub niche of comedy and does not have that blockbuster commercial appeal. But I knew that I really wanted to stay true to the story that I wanted to tell. And luckily, we managed to get distribution exactly a year after Picture Lock. So I knew that it resonated with some audience somewhere. And Gravitas Ventures is the company that distributed it, along with Gate 23, who's doing our airlines, saw it as a cult classic. And I think more than anything, it's one of those films that is set in a liberally conservative, but conservatively liberal, uncanny reality. And I think that's something that a lot of, in a weird way, people can relate to because given the nature of politics all over the world, it's either super conservative or super liberal, and there's no sort of weird middle ground. And this movie is in a weird middle ground world where, if you own a gun, you get free health insurance. And that was weird enough and relatable enough to be able to have it picked up, I think. Who knows? It could have been packaged with a ton of other movies too, which I assume it has to an extent, but who knows? We got it done.
Yeah, as long as it's getting out there, that's the main thing. So Gravitas Ventures, why them, and are they any good? Because obviously sales and distribution, it's a tricky part of the process. You would find it difficult to find a filmmaker who hasn't had a bad experience in some way with sales and distribution. So what made you go with them, and what's your experience been like so far?
They've been extremely wonderful. I really, really like them. Our acquisitions person, it also helps that she is a woman, and I was able to really I think she was really able to connect with this whole gender disruption that we were trying to work on. And they've been it's been pretty smooth sailing. I mean, their onboarding process was incredible. They are very much we all share the same goal, which is to get the movie out there and to get as many clicks and pre-orders and sales as possible. And I think being able to have that goal together is key. And more than anything, it's a two-way street, right? They're going to put in some money towards marketing. Doesn't mean that we should just let it go and just, all right, we're done, smooth sailing, take away from here. No, it's really a holistic team effort. And if you understand that as a filmmaker, that your job just doesn't end when distribution happens. It keeps going until, it really is out there and you're going to keep marketing it, and being able to work with them is really key. And having the same vision for the movie is really important, I think. And it's the same way that I work with my managers, is that we all have the same career vision, and working with Gravitas is it was just what we wanted for Trigger Happy. Gravitas wanted that the exact same thing. And so being able to align on that was key. So overall, it's been a really wonderful experience. And I really also love the sales team that we worked with, like Todd Slater at Brick Lane and Convoke, like great people. And again, they saw the movie and they understand the movie for what it is. And they were able to package it and sell it in a way that does have this comedic thriller appeal while still understanding the root core, which is this satirical madcap, wacky ass film.
And it's really important that you get that right, how your film is packaged, because if you don't, all that you end up doing is pissing off the person who's rented it or bought it, because they're not getting what they think they're getting. So it's really important that, you know, artwork, trailers, all of that kind of is telling the same story. Couldn't agree with that more.
Yeah.
So comedy, thriller. I've not done a comedy. How do you know it's funny while you're filming it? Filming usually isn't people, you know, laughing, ah ha ha, that was a good take, or was it? So how did you keep track of, right, okay, this is going to be funny while you were making it?
I always want to say never underestimate the PAs and the grips and the very below the line, because they don't give a fuck, really. They're here for their job. You know, they come in and out. But there are moments at lunch where they come up to you and they go, yo, that was really funny. That's validating to me. Like when a PA comes to me, is bold enough to come to me and say, yo, that was hilarious, that's when you know. And I think also, I mean, ultimately, it was all subjective, but where we really solidified the humor was during the audience testing, where we were able to really get the feedback on moments of humor versus more straight moments. Yeah.
And what about directing actors? What's your, as a debut filmmaker, done your first feature, what would be your advice for somebody else with directing actors?
Understand different acting techniques and be prepared to pull out of your tool belt, your kit, your directing kit, different ways to get your actor into character. I think the biggest thing that I've seen is directors get very caught up on the shot and the lens and the lighting. And that's really important to have a general overview and understand the technicalities, but you have to remember that your DP is the director of photography. Your job is to, work with actors and be able to speak their language. So huge part is obviously the casting process, right? And we worked with a casting director on this, but when it came down to the callbacks and working, you know, I'm asking them questions like, who are your dramaturgs? Who are your practitioners? And what kind of techniques do you use to be able to get yourself into character? And they'll talk to me through things like, oh, I use Chekhov, Stanislavski, Brecht, whatnot. And as a director, your job is to study all of that and be able to say, okay, you like Brecht. I know what that means, breaking the fourth wall. Here's that we can use that in this scene and that scene. So really understanding practitioners and dramaturgs and the language of theater to be able to communicate with your actors. And then blocking comes naturally with, you know, that's a three-way collab between actor, camera, and you. And then physicality, that's also a really tough one, especially in comedy. So making sure your AD gives you like ample rehearsal time, but also knowing and working with your actors ahead of time and planning like, okay, do you think you can get this in 3 takes max? Or do you need a little more rehearsal time or not? So it's just open communication and collaboration, because when you're on set, you don't have much time, so you want to use your time as effectively as possible. And then, I mean, when I'm like going through my director's notes in rehearsals or even prior to being on set, like I'm scribbling. I'm like, all right, at this point, you know, maybe we use a little bit of Stanislavski here. Maybe at this point we break this beat down and, you know, maybe have it be a little more Grotowskian. So yeah, understanding theatrical language and being able to communicate with actors in a language that they understand is really, really important.
Something I noticed with a lot of students is the obsession with equipment and the obsession with kit and the sort of nervousness around actors and performers. And that's not maybe an area that's not concentrated on enough. Is actually they're the thing you're there to film, so you've got to interact with them and you've got to kind of help them get the right performance out. I'm just checking if I've missed anything on my list I want to ask you. Oh yeah, so I did mention earlier that you've had a pretty good festival run with a lot of the projects you've worked on. Apart from making a good film, what are your tips for getting into festivals?
Having a really clear strategy on where your movie ultimately wants to live and what the goal is. I think the let's throw spaghetti at a wall and see what sticks approach is great when you have billions, gajillions of dollars to spare. But knowing that, okay, I want to hit an LA audience because I know I want to shoot my next movie in LA. Let me apply to LA festivals. That's key. Or, I want to shoot in Ireland, which is a hot new place to shoot. Let me go for Irish festivals. Let me get in touch with Irish programmers through LinkedIn, because everybody's on LinkedIn, is also key. So making sure you know where your film wants to live and gunning for that in anticipation for your next film. Now, if you're just trying to go for just purely marketing, like I just want flashy publicity, yes, go for the South by Sundances of the world, but best of luck, because those are harder to get into than ever before.
So you've made your debut feature. What do you wish you'd known when you started making that film?
What I wish I'd known is the runway from after post through all the way to distro acquisitions and sales. I think so many filmmakers get so excited with booking locations and getting the casting director and the wallpaper and the crew and all the fun stuff. And you forget that the creative part is really only the tiniest chunk sandwiched between two mega business forward acts. Like Act 1 and Act 3, business. Act 2, creative. And I wish I had a better understanding of acquisitions, distro, and sales prior to starting, because that would have really helped on the financing side, being able to really get extremely accurate numbers and understanding territories and who's buying what ahead of time and crunching those numbers and what that looks like. Even the miscellaneous unforeseen costs, like subtitles, captions, different audio tracks, all those nitty gritty post things that you don't think about at all. But you go through it and now you know. But those things I wish I had known way ahead of time, and the importance of marketing. Big deal. We're right in the thick of it right now, and I'm telling you, it is probably the hardest part. Like, harder than financing, harder than sales, acquisitions, distro, which is hard. Those are arguably extremely hard. Marketing right now, hands down, it is. We are getting totally hammered by marketing, which is, it's hard. So making sure you have a really, really important, at least a good understanding of a marketing campaign in development. Big deal.
Yeah, it is tough, the marketing stage. Although what you've highlighted there is, for me anyway, and I think a lot of creatives maybe feel like this, raising money, that's hard. Making the film, that's fun, like you say. Editing it, post-production, that's fun. So you are bookended by these two really heavy kind of, for me anyway, boring parts of it that I absolutely hate. And my producer wife, her job is probably 50% of that is stopping me moving on to something else before we've sold it and marketed it and done all the stuff that you've got to do after you've made the film, because it's very tempting to start working on something else. So if you're in that marketing zone at the moment, what would be your tips for that? And what has been your most successful platforms that you use to promote the film? Have you got any tips there?
Yeah, I want to say we did the throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks in terms of different social media platforms, and seeing which one got the better numbers, which is Reddit and Instagram. Instagram just because most of us are there, but Reddit because it resonates with that sort of underbelly cult audience. And so we really leaned into that demographic. So that was really key, understanding the metrics, because you have an idea like, okay, we think this is going to do well with millennials and Gen Z. but you don't really know until you get the statistics and the feedback from the specific platforms that you put them on, and then really being able to hone in on those. And yet, what I can tell you, and with full like honesty, views and likes do not necessarily translate to clicks and buys, which is so misleading, right? Because you can be getting like hundred thousands of views, 10K on the trailer, and you're like, yeah. And then you look at the actual numbers of how many people pre-order, you're like, that's a tiny percentage in comparison to the impressions that you're getting. So really finding that connection between the mass impressions to the actual click and buy, that's the tough part that we have yet to really figure it out. So I guess that's why marketing is really hard, because now with the world of social media and like everything on the internet, all hell's broken loose. You could post anything and it could go viral like that, but just because it's got millions of views doesn't mean you're going to buy that YouTuber's t-shirt. So that's been really difficult. So being aware that like not everything is as it seems, and not putting so much money towards AdSense without making sure that you can get that return on that investment with the click and buys. So what we're sort of shifting gears to is now going back to traditional industry press, going back to a publicist and seeing what we can get within the trades and seeing if that is going to translate at all. And we don't know because we haven't done it yet. The film has only been up for pre-order for 2 weeks, and then we're going to release it a month, but we shall see. We shall see what really works. And, maybe I can go back to you and say, yeah, we went through the traditional publicity trades route and did not yield as many results either. So it's a gamble. It's all a gamble.
Yes, it's not easy. I would definitely agree on the Reddit front, because I've had some success with that, and I think it's a path filmmakers don't normally go down, but Reddit is massive, and you've got people on there who really care about specific subjects. They're really into whatever they're chatting about. So, but it's using Reddit in a way that's not, hey everyone, I've made a film. It's me. I've made that film. Here's the film I've made, everybody. Have you seen my film? This is the trailer for my film. Here's the poster for my film. You can't do that. You've got to kind of find a way in that's not me. So it's a tough one. It's a tough one. So I was just going to finish off with 2 what I call fun questions. He says, so have you got a motto or a mantra for filmmaking?
Love the art in yourself, not yourself in the art. I think it's important as an artist or a filmmaker to do it because they love doing it, not because they seek validation. And ego is the root of all evil, in my opinion. And when you are in an industry that is so ego-driven with fame, money, drugs, rock and roll, glam, all of that, it's so easy to get led astray and to forget why you entered, because it's so easy to be distracted by fame. And I think fame is the devil. I think fame is a monster that is like the most addictive drug, especially in entertainment. And it's important to not get swept into that, because once you get swept into that and seeking constant external validation, you're gonna lose your sight as an artist and a filmmaker and your North Star.
Lovely. Okay, and then my last question is going to be, so yours is a comedy thriller. What's your favourite comedy or comedy thriller? What's your favourite film in that space?
I love Burn After Reading. Coen Brothers. Really, really, really funny. The Full Monty. Amazing. Hilarious film. I also love Tampopo. It's a Japanese film about ramen. Those 3 are my top 3. I love them.
Right. I will tell me about, what did you call it? Tampopo. What's it called? Tampopo. So that's the one I haven't watched. So pitch me that. What's that about and why is it funny?
Tampopo is a cute, quaint, quirky little story about a woman who opens a ramen shop. But the way it's structured is unique. Nothing like I've ever seen before. And there are cutaways the main timeline is this woman is trying to perfect the art of ramen. And that's ridiculous in itself. Very Japanese, but ridiculous if you think about it. Absurd. But then it cuts to these standalone short films that are about food. And each of those short films are wild and fucking hilarious. There is a scene where a woman is trying to steal like a little snack from a Japanese grocery store, and it turns onto a full thriller for 5 minutes. And then you just get brought back to this woman trying to make ramen. It's unique and funny, and I love it.
Hope you enjoyed that episode. If you'd like to hear from more industry professionals, how they got into the business and how you can do the same, or you just want to listen to some cool stories from movie sets around the world, then please do subscribe to the Honest Filmmaker podcast.